Welcome back. Graham Smith from ALEC here. We love straightforward ways of doing things. That's why we've put together a guide for writing really effective embedded literacy and numeracy learning outcomes. It's not exactly paint by numbers, but it's the basics of what you need, nothing more. This also relates to your Task 5 assessment for the NCALNE Vocational. You may wish to refer to your study guide or assessment guide for further information. As you know, the course tracks through 7 basic areas required by the unit standards and qualification. This presentation on designing and writing embedded literacy and numeracy learning outcomes relates to Part 5, Embedding Literacy and Numeracy. Like I said, we have a really simple and easy to follow way of writing learning outcomes. This process actually forces you to bring together 2 essential areas of your embedded training. These are, of course, the literacy and numeracy skills that you've already identified, perhaps through using the learning progression, and the specific vocational content that you deliver, your area of expertise, in other words. We have a formula for you, a kind of writing frame for writing embedded literacy and numeracy outcomes. But first I want to show you an example of what an embedded literacy and numeracy learning outcome looks like. Here we are. This is one of a set of learning outcomes developed by some trainers in the hospitality and travel industry. These trainers needed to design some training for their workforce that included different aspects of health and safety, but they needed to do it in a way that also took care of some of the workplace literacy requirements. The staff struggled with vocabulary in particular, so that, alongside the practical health and safety training, became a focus for their learning. Let me read it out to you. Identify and explain technical vocabulary in the context of adult resuscitation by developing a word bank of new and unfamiliar words, breaking new words down into syllables, identifying key acronyms and abbreviations used. Now let's have a look at what the formula looks like. First, there are 1 or 2 action verbs that describe what kind of learning is going on, and in this case, identify and explain. More on these action verbs later. Second, we can see the specific literacy or numeracy skill area that these trainers identified. Here it's technical vocabulary. Third, we have the actual vocational content area. Usually this is your area of expertise if you're a trades tutor or vocational trainer. This is followed by a set of focused activities. Here's another example. This one was created by a couple of guys working in civil construction. They had already identified some issues with the paperwork their workers had to fill out. One problem in particular related to completing vehicle logbooks, a legal requirement that had big penalties if people messed it up or didn't do it. The learning outcomes here were part of a training solution they implemented that cut down rework and administration time from 2 hours per week down to just 30 minutes per week. That was a huge saving for them. Over time we've tinkered with this formula a little, but here's the latest version. We're also a bit picky about how you write things down. The formula works best if you follow the structure exactly. Make sure you include the words "in the context of" after you've written down the specific literacy or numeracy skills you want to focus on. Also, make sure you add the word "by" after you've described the particular vocational content that you're working on. And finally, make sure each of your activities starts with an ing word. Yes, I know I'm being picky, but just humour me, follow the rules, and you'll get a much tighter, more well-written learning outcome. Okay, so that takes care of the learning outcomes. I said before that I wanted to just come back to those action verbs, the ones that describe the learning. I want to introduce you to something called Bloom's taxonomy. Some of you might have heard of it. That's just a fancy word for a list of words, action verbs in this case. And I've adapted Bloom's list of action words so they fit into a pōtama, a Māori model of learning and development, among other things. Here it is. It's a staircase, and each step represents a different kind of learning. One of your handouts expands on this, and you can download that from our website, www.alec.ac.nz, or if you Google the words Bloom's Revised Taxonomy, you'll find a whole range of different lists organized in a similar fashion. You can use these lists of words when you are writing your learning outcomes, and I'm going to suggest that most of the learning that goes on for your students happens in the first 3 steps of the POTAMA: remembering things, understanding things, and then applying them. And I'd also like to suggest that each step or stage builds on the one before it. For example, it's hard to apply new knowledge if you can't understand it or even remember it. Does that make sense? Okay, we've got a couple of workshop tasks for you to complete. One of your handouts contains a set of brief case studies and scenarios for trades-related training. Read through these case studies to get an idea of the literacy and numeracy demands, then have a go at designing some embedded literacy and numeracy learning outcomes. Just follow the format. Aim for contextualization. Then you can compare with what the participants actually did. And here's a question for you to keep in mind when you're working on it or when you're finished. How would you measure learner progress in relation to these outcomes? Here's your second workshop task. Have a go at writing a set of embedded outcomes for yourself, for your trade. If you want a quick start, assume that the main demands from the training resources or your context will be around the comprehension of technical vocabulary. Or another place to focus on is specific measurement that people need to do or other complex numeracy requirements. Complete the learning outcomes according to the format, then brainstorm a set of contextualized activities to go with it for developing the related literacy and numeracy skills. Design a set of mini assessment tasks to use before and after so that you can measure learner progress. And here's your third workshop task. If you've got time for it or if you've got access to it, use the assessment tool results for, say, 3 learners. Complete an independent learning plan, or ILP, for each learner, or even the whole group if it's appropriate. Then use these learning plans to guide you and write embedded literacy and numeracy learning outcomes. Design some appropriate and, wherever possible, contextualized activities, and then design a set of pre- and post mini assessment tasks to measure learner progress in relation to these outcomes. One last thing, if you get stuck for literacy and numeracy activities, and I don't think you will, but if you need to, use the support resources that come with the learning progression. You can also adapt and modify what other people have done. You might want to have a look online as well. But my personal favourite, design your own activity. Hey, thanks for listening to this little segment. There's more on YouTube. If you need a hand, drop me a line. Thanks, bye.